Well, that's an interesting afternoon, isn't it? Where do we start on this? Where do we go? Daniel. Well, let's start with the actual news. Daniel Levy has gone. Let's read the club's official statement. Tottenham Hotspur announces that Daniel Levy has today stepped down from his role as executive chairman after nearly 25 years. Tottenham Hotspur has been transformed over the last quarter of a century. It has played in European competitions in the last 18 of 20 seasons, becoming one of the world's most recognised football clubs, consistently investing in its academy, players, don't know about consistently on that one, and facilities, including a new world-class stadium and state-of-the-art training centre. The club has also competed regularly at the highest level, enjoying a number of fantastic on-field successes, including the recent Europa League Cup win. As part of its succession planning, the club has made a number of senior appointments in the recent months. Vinai Venkatesham was hired as CEO, with Thomas Frank as our new men's head coach, and Martin Ho as the women's head coach. Peter Charrington joined the board and will step into the newly created role of non-executive chairman. This is all part of the club's ambition to ensure that it is set up to deliver long-term sporting success. Daniel Levy has said,
"I am incredibly proud of the work I have done together with the executive team and all of our employees. We have built this club into a global heavyweight, competing at the highest level. More than that, we have built a community. I was lucky enough to work with some of the greatest people in this sport, from the team at Lily Whitehouse and Hotspur Way to all the players and managers over the years. I wish to thank all of the fans that have supported me over the years. It hasn't...
What's that about? 5 of them.
It hasn't always been an easy journey, but significant progress has been made. I will continue to support this club passionately."
I had to do one for the ages there. If anyone used to watch my old things, you'll know why I was doing that stupid voice there. Peter Charrington, non-executive chairman, said, "I am very honoured to become non-executive chairman of this extraordinary club." It is extraordinary indeed, Peter. On behalf of the board, I would like to thank Daniel and his family for their commitment and loyalty to the club over so many years. This is a new era of leadership for the club on and off the pitch. I do recognise there has been a lot of change in recent months as we put in place new foundations for the future. We are now fully focused on stability and empowering our talented people across the club, led by Vinai and his executive team. There are no changes, and this is not Peter Charrington's quote, says at the end, there are no changes to the ownership or shareholder structure of the club. I mean, wow. What would you have given? What would you have given to have been a fly on the wall during these? Because this has been made to sound very like amicable. This has been, and maybe it was in part, maybe it was quite amicable. But I can't help but feel, if you've ever watched Succession, I can't help but feel there is an air of something. Do you know what I mean? That finally he's been sat down by the bigger dogs because, Levy's a big fish. I think he literally owns a stake in the club as well, I believe. Like Enoch own a part. I think Levy personally owns a part of the club, but still a minority stake. And I really do just wonder if finally we'd heard that things were starting to move with Joe Lewis stepping aside, his daughter stepping into the fold and being actively involved, not just wanting to be a kind of backseat kind of person sat there and just watching the money grow, if you like, that she wanted to be more actively involved. And this is all just hearsay, things that we see on the internet. But I do wonder if finally he has just been sat down and they've said, Daniel, mate, it's time to go, lad. That's it. It's done. It's interesting, you know. It is. There's a lot of very mixed feelings on the subject. I would say I'm just going to say up front, my sort of gut, my instant gut feeling towards it is happy. I'm happy he's gone. And I don't hate the bloke. I don't subscribe to the idea that he's destroyed our football club. I'll get into this type of stuff. I'll talk about like Levy and his legacy in a bit. I'm just talking right now, immediate knee-jerk feeling. I'm happy. I think it's the right time. I think it's overdue. To be honest, I think it's been a good few years now that it's just not been working, has it? It hasn't been working. It hasn't been pretty much the creation of the stadium. When the stadium was opened, that was Levy's legacy, right? That should have been the moment when this happened. Bye bye. This is what I've left you with. That's my life's work. And I think had he left at that point, there was a lot of goodwill. There was like people were annoyed. People were annoyed, but we still had Pochettino in charge. We still had Kane, Son, a very good team. There was still a lot of scope there for the team to grow and for it to be a successful, exciting period for the club with the opening of that stadium. But I think time and time again now, because he's clung on to it, because he's clung on to that bit of power since he opened up the stadium, he's fumbled it time and time again. And I appreciate football isn't always straightforward. I appreciate that there's certain things that happen behind the scenes that the fans aren't always privy to. So for me to sit here and say he's fumbled it, having half an idea of what he's done for the club and all this type of stuff in the past few years. Yeah. But also, I think we all have enough grip on the situation and things that are going on right in football to say that it's just not been working. It hasn't, like, one mess after the other. Mourinho to Conte to Nuno Espirito Santo to all that sort of messing around to, the idea of Harry Kane. Like, obviously he wanted to leave, but then when he did finally end up leaving us, not allowing him back into the club and sullying that relationship, and lots of very weird things that have gone on. The main sort of one of the main examples of this is, even though it feels like we kind of got a bit done over this summer with the Eza deal and everything like that, we're also looking at a deal that, look, I think we can all say, really, when all is said and done, we should have just gotten that deal done. If we wanted Eza, if we felt that he was a player that was going to add to the squad, we would have gotten that one done. But it feels like, as much as we kind of got a bit done over by Parish and by the player himself, at the same time, had we not again spent a week, 10 days, kind of quarreling over minor details, trying to bring the price down a bit with Palace, all this type of stuff, the typical hallmarks of a Daniel Levy deal, we would have gotten that deal done. We would have gotten it done. The reason, and what we know is, and I think we have to face facts is, yes, Eze did us over, yes, Parish did us over, but we wouldn't have been in that position if we'd have acted before Kai Havertz got injured. Kai Havertz got injured, significant injury, apparently, whatever, we don't know yet, but still, seems like a significant injury, and Arsenal sprung into action and got the deal done because they kind of had it done in principle, and then they cooled off because they focused their attention elsewhere, and that opened up the door for Spurs. And what Levy did is what he always does, is he thought, well, there's a deal to be done here now because we've got Palace over a barrel. Like, we've got them, and they don't have any option but to accept me lowballing them, trying to get their best player for a reduced price. Quabble over the deal, and then lo and behold, it didn't get done. Arsenal came in and they clicked on like that. And this summer has been, I think that was like that felt like the final nail, didn't it? And I'm not saying they've gotten rid of him because he didn't get the Eza deal over the line, but continued protests, continued kind of media spotlight on the way he operates, on the direction of the club, on the way the club has acted in certain situations and things. It's just, there's just a lot of noise around it now. And it just really has been like, it's time to go, mate. It is time to go. That's from a fan's perspective. I don't know what the club what's prompted them to do this, if it is something like that or not. Who knows? Like, we don't know. What we do know is, though, that he has gone 25 years. And do you know what? Funnily enough, I'll tell you what, it was kind of annoying. I literally just this afternoon, I've just published a podcast I've done with Paul O'Keefe, where we were talking about the transfer deadline day and all that type of stuff, and Tottenham's summer business and everything. And Paul actually said to me as we were recording this, and it's out there. It should be going live now across everyone's channels. Paul said to me on that, he got a question essentially that asked if there's any updates on naming rights. Why has the stadium still not got any naming rights or anything? And Paul was basically like, things are happening at the club. I don't know exactly what's happening, but things are happening. It could be Levy going. It could be Levy stepping aside. So just watch this space, basically. And then lo and behold, what, about 15 minutes, 20 minutes after we finish recording, bang, that drops. So go listen to that pod. It's a very good discussion. Paul is excellent value as per usual. But what I thought was an audio Paul O'Keefe bomber dropping exclusively on Rule the Roost has obviously been destroyed by Daniel Levy and the club at the last minute. Maybe that's his. Maybe I'll allow my ego will allow me to believe that that's his last swipe at me. Personally, he stepped aside, so denying me that bomb. But look, I'm not going to keep wobbling on about that. I mean, let's see what. I mean, there's a lot of comments coming in here. Grammar Smosh says, "Holy rude word, lads." Walex says, "Blimey." Simon Rush, hello, mate, says, "I did not see this coming." Super big dumb face says, "Why do I feel uneasy about this?" Lazzarini, hello, mate. I don't know what to do with myself, Jack. I know, just pace the room, mate. Pace the room like a granddad. Hands behind your back, sort of looking down into the middle distance, just walking in small circles, muttering to yourself. That's a good way. Expend a bit of that nervous energy. I think that's what you got to do. Robert says, "Part of me just died inside and is reborn." God, what, sounded a bit like Danny Kelly then, didn't I? But I mean, it's a matter of time, isn't it? That comparison's been made several times. I mean, I'm flattered by that. Danny Kelly is a long-time broadcaster and a very successful man. So people making fun of me saying I'm a young Danny Kelly, I'll take that. I'll take that. Bait Malzinho says, "This is arguably the biggest news headline of my Spurs supporting life. He was at the top of the club for 25 years of my 32 years on this planet. We are about to tread completely untested waters." I mean, yeah, that's pretty interesting, mate. Grammar Smosh says, "I think the Lewis family finally had enough." A few people now laughing because I guess this was the point I was doing my Daniel Levy voice. Amazing to hear the Tetrunk Levy voice again after all this time. See, I wheel it out for special occasions, you see. I'm not a performing monkey, all right? I'm not, but I will wheel it out to be bait when there's numbers to be had, right? Hacker BLCPS says, "Lol." K9 McGurn 1 says, "Is it okay to admit I'm happy he's gone, but also very nervous what is next?" Look, yes, change is a weird thing, K9. It is a weird thing. It is something to be nervous about. football is a fractious landscape as well. Look, there's all sorts of like pathetic owners. One of the points, I keep referencing this podcast that no one's probably going to listen to now, but they should. It's really good discussion with Paul O'Keefe. As I say, very good value. Go have it, find it wherever you find your podcasts. But as I was talking to about on Paul on there, like that made no sense. As I was talking to with Paul on there, the point is that like Daniel Levy, yes, he's a divisive figure, but I look at Manchester United, for example. I look at the kind of the mess that they are, and there's that reassurance in the back of my head. At least we're not that. At least we kind of got somebody that, yes, doesn't always get it right, but doesn't always get it wrong either, like they do. So, yes, I understand that, and I totally feel there's a trepidation here for who could be in charge, how they run the club, what happens to us from here. However, what I would say is our infrastructure is unbelievable. The stadium's amazing. Training ground's amazing. The brand is, I know what I'm saying. I'm catching myself as I say this, but the brand is amazing. We're a huge club now. The platform is there to be astronomical, right? And the main point I will say, like as a negative towards Levy, and I've said this so many times down the years on this podcast, but Daniel Levy feels like the Jose Mourinho of chairman. That's what he felt like. He was a young, ambitious game changer. That's what he was back in the day, right? And I will talk, I like I say, I am going to get onto his legacy, so I don't want to sort of go over too much ground, but he was a game changer. He's lived off of that reputation now for too long. Same as Mourinho has done in a footballing sense, as a managerial sense. They've lived off of that reputation for too long. They've stagnated in position, and around them, it's gotten toxic and it's just gotten messy. And I think it's yes, any sort of gamble in life carries with it a risk. Of course it does. But I think we all know it was the end of the road for Levy. Like we got to the end point now. There was nowhere else to go. Like we'd seen it all. And Alan Claudius Fitzpatrick Gerald Martin V. What a name. Says that 18 to 20 seasons in Europe is genuinely a very impressive feat, considering where he took over. Oh, 18 of 20. Sorry, I see what you mean. I thought you were talking about the 2018 to 2020 period in the Champions League, which also applicable. 18 of 20 seasons in Europe is genuinely a very impressive feat, considering where he took over from. I'm the first to criticize him, but sometimes you have to give the devil his due, which, yeah, is true. Hacker says, Ange broke Levy. What a legend is my first thought. James Glanville says, Peter Charrington sounds like a character from The Vicar of Dibley. He does. Peter Charrington, the butcher, doesn't it? That's kind of what I feel. Who wants some chops? I'm Peter Charrington, the local butcher. Lovely. I'll do you a lovely deal on a T-bone there. Oh, sorry. Aubrey Davis says, was it amicable? Was it balls? Yeah, I feel with you. Bait Malzinho says Daniel Levy owns 29% of ENIC. Okay, maybe that's where I was going wrong. So interesting. Grammar Smush says some ITK are reporting that Peter Charrington was the man who pushed him out. Get out, Daniel. Get out. I've got sausage. I've got sausages and chops to flog here, lad. You get out at road. Robert says, I wonder what Thomas Frank is thinking. I mean, did he know? Like the, what is it? The meme? Did he know? Maybe he did. Maybe this has been in the pipeline. Maybe the Ezra deal and all that meant absolutely nothing. Maybe we've known this for a long time. It will be interesting to see, won't it? The truth, the truth will out, said somebody once. Oprah Rules says the fundamental finances of the club are solid. In theory, more funds can be allocated towards transfer fees and wages. It's a roll of the dice whether that will happen. I think it will. I think it will. Surely, look, a new owner, a billionaire isn't. It's not a new owner. For a start, it's not a new owner. It's still the same people, but it's maybe operationally it will be different. I think we can say this summer, for example, we've started to see the seeds of change. We've all been questioning Xavi Simons. How's that Kudus? When we went from Kudus to Morgan Gibbs White in the space of 24 hours, I know it didn't work out, but that's what the club were intending to do. That's what we were trying to do. There's talk still. Paul was saying they still want Savinho. They still want Semenyo, one of the two. So come January, it's difficult to get these deals done in January, but there's every intention to revisit these deals. There's still money there. The club is acting differently in a way. And we've all been quick. Has Levy finally broken? Why is he doing this? But now we're starting to see, guess it wasn't him. So I think, whoever is the stewardship of the club, the way it's going, the direction it's going, I think we are probably going to see something very different, Tom Kingham says, we've got to say thank you. He's been a terrific businessman at the club. There you go. Lazzarini says, to be fair, you'd have to be willfully ignorant to think Levy hasn't moved the club forward, but it's the right time for someone else to have a go. Probably 5 years ago, but better late than never. Zeros and ones. I think I learned what Daniel Levy's voice sounded like from your old videos.
Yes, you did.
John W says, strange that Levy did that Neville video recently. Yeah, but you kind of get it, don't you? He probably knew at that point he wasn't long to be in charge anymore. And as he said, I think people will appreciate me more when I'm gone. Zeros and ones also says, Levy thought his legacy would be the Super League. Yeah, maybe. John W, aside from the Ange sacking, he's done right by us after the Europa win, incredible trophy parade, and the last game of the season was good apart from the game. Trophy parade was unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. The club went as big as they should have done, which was massive. It's a huge achievement, and it was massive, and we needed that. The fan base needed that, and I think that's kind of why I know I've been a bit happy clappy even after the Bournemouth game this season, but I'm in a bubble of, I was slightly annoyed during the transfer window, but I wasn't really kicking off. Didn't kick off after Bournemouth because honestly, I'm still floating on air after the Europa League. I honestly am. That trophy parade, I can honestly say, there was honestly a bit in the back of my head where I'd actually convinced myself, it's not like a negative way. I wasn't like, we're never going to do it. There was just like this intrusive thought in the back of my head where I was like, I'm never going to see, we're never going to see Spurs win something again. If I live another 40, 50 years, I sort of feel like I'm never going to see Spurs win something again. Just because of the way football is and blah, 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 blah. And then so winning that trophy, winning the Europa League, a massive trophy in both stature and in physical size, obviously. Sonny's last grasp at sort of doing something for Tottenham, all the factors at play there. The fact we honoured that properly with a massive parade, proper massive parade. And that would have cost a few bob to put on as well. It really would have done. As much as we talk about the club being cheap and doing things, if you were there, and I'm not trying to do it in that way, but if you were there, you will know what I mean. It was a proper occasion that the club put on. It was incredible. It was amazing. So, Yes, he gave us that, and that's good. William Gardner said, thought I was having a standard uneventful Thursday. Yeah. I think all the big podcasts are out for the week. And then this has come. So right now, Flav sat there chatting to whoever. You got bloody View from the Lane will be sat down, I'm sure, Extra Inch, Hometown Glory, everybody will be out there doing their sort of their bits. So yeah. I love this. Johnny Cudworth said, Daniel might have left, but we still have the same owners. Isn't it just aren't we just putting lipstick on a pig with regards to somebody else sitting in the hot seat? No, I don't know, maybe. Ben Mathis says, hello, mate. Maybe a precursor to a wholesale. I don't know, mate. I'm not so sure. Paul wasn't so sure on that fact when I spoke to him on the pod earlier. Didn't think that was the case. Thinks it is more just, who is it? Tavistock, isn't it? That own ENIC and everything. Taking more of a, an active control in things now. Who knows? Anon says, what if we get an even bolder, even more frugal chairman in? I mean, yeah, maybe. Jorah Singh says the protests worked. Maybe. Sasha says, what next? Petro State? I'm relieved yet scared. Yeah. Darren just joined. What the hell is happening? I mean, look, we're all scrabbling around in the dark here, Darren. We're all trying to make sense of this, right? We're all on this journey together. Thank you for joining me, though. Yeah. Who knows, mate? Who knows? Francesca Sidoli says, give it Paul O'Keefe to the end of the season. Why not? Let's give it a go. Can we have a revolving door of podcasters in charge of the club? Because we seem to know everything, don't we? Like we seem to be able to sit here and say how the club should be run and what Daniel Levy should be doing. So maybe now is our time to shine. I've got big opinions. I'll sit down in the boardroom and say, right, who are we going to buy next then? Mbappe, let's have a go. He's not settled at Real Madrid, has he? Let's think big. Let's aim for the top. And then I'll be told by loads of stats accounts why Mbappe would be a poor choice to Tottenham Hotspur. A shot of Tim in Capital says, Daniel Levy took Tottenham from a mid-level club to a top six with some of the best training facilities and stadium. Yep. Welcome in Pieces says, Jack, mate, the Levy voice in your videos, did you know that was his voice or did you just nail it on what he looks like? I sort of had a vague idea, but I obviously amped it up and was a bit silly with it. One thing I would ask right now is, if you are watching this live, if you can drop the video a like, please, that would be massively appreciated, because the more people that like it, see, there's quite a few people watching it and there's definitely not as many likes as there are people watching it. So if you could just drop it a like, it means it will get suggested to more people and my ego gets more validated. So please do that. I appreciate that massively. Hacker BLCPS says, give Flav a ring and see if it... Shall I do it? Shall I embarrass myself? Let's see. Let's see if Flav will pick up. I bet he won't. I bet the pig's doing some sort of he'll be doing a podcast of his own. I know he will be. Let's have a look. Let's try him now. Oh. He's not going to answer, is he? I don't think he is. I think he's doing a podcast. He's airing me. He's sat there now. He's looking at his phone and he's thinking, oh, God, why is he calling? Call declined. Look at that. What a pig. There you go. Stephen King says, won myself a bet with my pal. I've got a tenner. Get in. I called it earlier in the summer. Tenner. It's not to be sniffed at, mate. Nice one. Let's just hope he gives it you. Do you know what I mean? Praetorian Dwarf says, I asked this on the Fighting Cock years ago and will ask again here. Levy's memoirs. What bit do you want to read first? Ooh. Do you know what I do want to read? I tell you, honestly, what I want to read first is the decision around the Pochettino era, 16-17 and so on and so forth, to get no players in. I want to know about that because that to me, that's the biggest fumble. People can say what they want about Pochettino. He was difficult. He had specific players in mind. He was difficult in the respect that he wanted players that would improve an exceptional team, right? I get that. Like, I get the idea behind that in terms of if the club are offering him kind of Ross Barkley and players like that, he's sitting there saying, I've got Wanyama, I've got Dembele, like I've got Ericsson. I need players that can step into this and take us up a level. And we didn't do that. And that is the biggest fumble of Daniel Levy's career. Because if after the 16-17 season, we finish second, we spend that summer £100 million, say at that time, we spent around £100 million at that time. We threw caution to the wind and we thought, let's go for it. At that point, Spurs go and win the Premier League next season. Spurs might win the double next season. Spurs might win the Champions League that next season. That 17-18 season, going into those next few years. If we added somebody massive at that point, a real marquee, huge flagship signing that took everything up a notch, and that's what we knew we needed. Do we hold on to Kyle Walker? Do we keep Danny Rose happy still? Less disillusioned with where the club was going. He said, didn't he, in that interview, all we ever do is buy players that we have to Google. But if we'd have after that season, we've come second. The last season at White Hart Lane, the old stadium, looked absolutely unbelievable, unbeaten at home all season. If we'd have just been brave in that window and dropped money, big money, serious money, Spurs could have won the lot. We absolutely could have won the lot. It was there. It was there in his hands. It was there. And we didn't do it. That's the bit in the memoirs. I want to hear how he's justified that as a decision. We'll see, aren't we? It's a bit weird. Chris says this was all going on early June, so I'm not surprised. Oh, I'm sorry, Chris. I'm sorry. You were so much more enlightened than the rest of us plebs here. Look at us all scrabbling around in the dirt, getting all excited about the chairman of 25 years going. Chris already knew. Chris knew back in June. So, there we go. It's a weird one. Look, I said I was going to reflect on Daniel Levy, my immediate thoughts on Daniel Levy's legacy. I almost said Daniel Levy's legacy. His legacy? No, Americans don't even say legacy, do they? Legacy? Everyone says legacy, I think. Look, he is obviously a character who has split opinion for many, many years, right? It's been a divisive issue at the head of the club, right? Yes, there's been rumblings at various different points down the years, and the intensity of those rumblings has been less. In the last few years, however, not everything needs to be compared to Arsenal, like forever in their shadow. But I think about the Wenger era at Arsenal, and it was a long and glorious period for them. And then it suddenly wasn't, right? But people kind of could grin and bear it because they were looking at the pros and cons of it. But then in the last few years of it, it was protests, it was toxicity, it was an unhappy place. There was too much noise off the pitch. And that's just the same with Daniel Levy. Like, to say that Daniel Levy, like some people do, is single-handedly destroying our club and all that type of thing, I don't buy, and I've never bought that idea. I've never bought the idea that he was single-handedly destroying the club, that he was doing this. What Daniel Levy was doing for me is ensuring that the club was very sound. It was sound in a business sense, and more often than not, sound in a footballing sense. What Daniel Levy wasn't doing really is ever, as much as he said, really, to the contrary of whatever it was that he said, he was never really going. He was never going for the top, was he? He was never trying to lasso the moon or anything, whatever else you want to say. He was never shooting for the very top. So I was always confident under Levy's stewardship that we'd never be an actual basket case. We'd never do kind of what, I mean, I say do what Manchester United do. Manchester United is still a regularly successful football club. They still win trophies. We say Manchester United aren't successful because they're not what Manchester United used to be. But the success Manchester United have had in the last decade, like since Fergie's gone, the success that Manchester United have tasted is still more than 99% of other clubs in the country. And I include Arsenal in that. There's a hot take from this. Manchester United, since Ferguson have left, have still been a more successful football club than Arsenal have. The only clubs probably more successful than are Chelsea, Manchester City and Liverpool. But we look at them as being a bit of a basket case, don't we, because of what they were. But look, the main thing is, look at West Ham. Look at the shambles that they are. Look at the way that kind of always falls to pieces. Look at Aston Villa now. We were all singing, everyone was singing Aston Villa's praises a couple of years ago. But now look at them. They're in trouble. They bought one player this summer. They're losing all their best talent because they weren't run sustainably. They were run in a silly slapdash fashion because they tried to grab at success. Spurs have never done that. So I've always felt comfortable in what Daniel Levy's done. I'm 40 years old now, right? And yeah, this is going to go a bit in my day and whatever. But when I was growing up to the age of 10, 11, 12, Tottenham were awful. All that I heard was my dad, when I'd complain, when I was a kid and I'd complain about Spurs, we never win, we never do anything. My dad would always say, look, we're a great club. We've tasted some great success. In the 80s, we won, blah, 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 blah. And in my head, I'm like, I don't care. I wasn't alive. Obviously, you do care. As you get older, you appreciate your history and stuff. In that moment when you're a kid, all I'm thinking is, my football team's awful. I'm never going to see him play in Europe. I'm never going to, let alone play in the Champions League. When I'm sat there watching the Champions League on ITV, seeing Manchester United coming back against Bayern Munich, all those sort of incredible, huge memories. Zinedine Zidane's volley from outside the box and all this type of stuff. That was the stuff of dreams. I would sit there and watch. I didn't have Sky growing up, so I'd sit there and watch like the Serie A on Football Italia on Sundays. Look at all the superstars there. Look at all those incredible, amazing players, and think, because in my head I was like, I'm never going to see that for Spurs. That's never how it's going to happen for us. Like, that's just not the club we are. That's not the club. It didn't mean I loved Spurs any less. Spurs are always my team. They're always my club. I've got the ticket stubs up on the wall behind me from my first ever football matches, and the first game I went to at Spurs and the second game I ever went to. I love this club. It's in my heart. I'm not, and it's not something I'm asking for a medal for. Like, everyone watching this is the same. Like, you all know what I'm saying, right? So you love this club, but we always knew, there was always this sense that Spurs were never going to be anything. We were never going to be anything. And the way really that I'd enjoy football is the World Cup, because everybody loved the World Cup. Again, England, when I was growing up, in a very similar position. Nobody cared about England. We weren't very good. Yeah, we'd had a good tournament in Italia 90, but didn't even make the 1994 World Cup. So you enjoyed the carnival of football that was the World Cup. You enjoyed the Euros, Euro 96, amazing. What an incredible experience that was. But as far as Spurs went, Spurs were what they were. Maybe at some point, again, we'd win an FA Cup or something, because that's what Spurs do. But never in my life did I think I would see Spurs be a Champions League team, be a team that would be spoken about as a team that could actually do something. And what I will give Daniel Levy is his stewardship of the club turned us into a serious football team. And I don't think we can deny that. I don't think you can deny that. His legacy will be one that's, it's got some flags, there's some marks against it, but what also needs to be acknowledged, and one thing I will give him, that, bigger me, I know, but one thing that he needs to be given is the fact that really you look at the pack of clubs that Spurs were in, right? In the early eras of the Premier League, it was Man United, it was Arsenal, to a lesser extent, it was Liverpool. I know Villa had some dalliances at the very, I think the first season they almost won the Premier League, first season of the Premier League. But I'm talking about the sort of the early period, the early years of the Premier League, going on from the mid-90s into the noughties. It was Manchester United, it was Arsenal, it was Liverpool, Chelsea were becoming more of a thing at that point. And then you had that pool of teams, didn't you? Newcastle, Villa, Spurs, Everton, that sort of little four of us, teams who were sleeping giants, teams with big fan bases, proud clubs with big histories, who really had fallen by the wayside a bit, who could maybe make a push for something, as Newcastle showed at one point, could maybe make a push for something at one point or another. But then over the next few years, under the early years of Levy's stewardship, seeing Spurs pull away from those teams a bit. We pulled away from those teams and almost became a bit of an island. We became a little island sat there behind Man United, Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool. And then there was Spurs kind of there floating around, doing their own little thing, where suddenly we became a bit of a problem, not enough of a problem where those top four teams worried about us, but we started to become something that they peered over their shoulders at, and the teams behind us were looking at in the distance. It was suddenly, how are Spurs doing that? And Levy was, he galvanized this. He brought in a young core of English players, young talent, buying the best young players from around the country, putting them in, building a team around that, putting belief in young players, and build it, and making a few smart signings, a few smart acquisitions here and there. Like Liverpool, Ian Graham, is it? Liverpool's Moneyball guy. We had him first before, and we didn't. You can listen to his book, How to Win the Premier League. We didn't utilize him as effectively as Liverpool have done, but still the thought was there early days from Tottenham. How can we be smart? How can we get an edge on the teams above us? We can't spend as much as the teams above us, but we can still get an edge. We can be smart in our signings. Signing players like Luka Modric out of nowhere, where, he's obviously gone on to be one of the most legendary players ever. We got him ahead of all the other big clubs because we'd identified him. Dimitar Berbatov, another prime example. Yeah, Dimitar Berbatov was a player of some, he had some reputation. There was an amazing goal he'd scored for Leverkusen that I remember keep seeing, where it was almost a bit like Dele Alli's against Crystal Palace, but from a more acute angle. He sort of rainbow flicks it over his head and volleyed it into the roof of the net. So we knew Dimitar Berbatov had something. So, but what my point is that Spurs were acting in a smart way. And then obviously all of a sudden, we weren't this island anymore. All of a sudden, we're finishing in the top four. All of a sudden, we're starting to beat teams like Arsenal, beat teams like Manchester United, which we'd never done, beat teams like Liverpool. Yes, not that often in Liverpool's case, but still doing it. And then obviously there's some luck along the way, you would say. You can call it luck, but he hired Maurizio Pochettino. You know, I think maybe nobody was expecting Maurizio Pochettino to be quite the phenomenon that he was, and for that squad to be quite as incredible as they turned out to be. Nobody saw Harry Kane coming. Nobody saw that coming. I mean, Windy has a bit of a claim on that, doesn't he, from back in the day? But still, nobody knew quite how good Harry Kane. So obviously, Spurs have been lucky to an extent. But Son Heung-min, another example. Lest we forget Sonny, like a player who was signed, probably going to be an all right Bundesliga signing, we were probably hoping, who has also himself gone on to be one of the club's greatest ever players. And that's not just sentiment. That's not being sentimental. Son Heung-min clearly is one of the club's greatest ever players. From a fairly kind of modest transfer fee, 20-something million pounds. And that's Daniel Levy. That is what he's done. I mean, you have to give him that. You have to give him that. Spurs turned into a club that is spoken about around the world. You can go on holiday now to Cyprus, Greece, Turkey, Spain, wherever. And you will see on those dodgy market stalls selling those dodgy knockoff DH Gate, before DH Gate was a thing, shirts. And what will you see on there now? Tottenham shirts. Never in a million years was that going to be a thing. Never in a million years was that going to be a thing. But now you will see Tottenham shirts on there. And that is Daniel Levy's legacy as well. That's something he's that. Do you think he'd appreciate that? Daniel Levy, your legacy is knockoff Tottenham shirts on market stalls that boozed up Brits abroad will buy on their holidays. But there's something bigger behind that, right? Like you get the point I'm making. The footprint this club has now globally is gargantuan. It's enormous. And yeah, you're going to have other fans of other clubs say, what are you talking about, Tim Pot? But they know that's not true. We know that's not true. People come from miles around. People come from all over the globe to come and watch this football club and sit in that stadium, which, my core memories are in the old White Hart Lane. So I'm always going to struggle to talk about how great the new stadium is, but just as a piece of architecture, as somewhere to go and enjoy huge events, it's a marvel. It's incredible. The acoustics in there when the ground is rocking are unbelievable. That U2 guy came good. Dan did that. He gave us pints that fill up from the bottom and the U2 roof, man. Well done, Daniel. And shirts on market stalls. Like I say, the football has this power to kind of break through cynicism. It does. I'm a cynical, miserable sod at the best of times. I'm sure you know this, right? And football has that power to break through that. Football has that power to do this corny kind of stuff about like the capacity to make us dream, to make us believe in something. That is what football does. And I would say in my heart, this is the thing, in my heart, all I can think about is the young lad, me, that is. That's not me in bed with another man called David, as he says in The Office. That little Jack that was sat there thinking, I love my club, but I'm never going to see them be anything. I'm always going to be made fun of by my friends that support Arsenal or Man United or Liverpool and things like that. I'm never going to see my club do anything really. And I would say in this time I've seen that club not only compete in the Champions League, get to the final, to win the Europa League, to beat Manchester United in a cup final, to see some of the greatest players of all time play for this club, before my eyes, and that's not just Daniel Levy. I know we've had Hoddle, we've had Blanchard, we've had some incredible players down the years. But what I'm talking about, like in this modern football sense, seeing Gareth Bale light up the Champions League in the way that he did do, seeing that young player come through to have the platform to. Obviously, we didn't buy Gareth Bale that complete package, but we bought one of the most promising young players, gave him that platform to succeed, to show those talents, to show the world how incredible he could be, and in turn lift the club up as well. See players like Kane, see players like Son, Ericsson, Dele, Vertonghen, Alderweireld, Hugo Lloris, World Cup winner, Christian Romero, World Cup winner. Seeing these starred, incredible players that I would have only once upon a time sat and on a Sunday afternoon watched on Football Italia playing for all the other clubs. The fact we have players, we have had and have players like that playing for our team, playing for our thing is the stuff of dreams. That trophy parade was the stuff of dreams. It was unbelievable. And so in my heart, all I can say now after all of this, after it's settled, is a thank you to Daniel Levy. I can, because that's what he's given us. But at the same time, it was the right time to go, because as much as he's created this for us, he created this platform for joy. We're only human. It's only natural. Expectations shift. The club has changed, right? It's what he has created is a super club, right? What Daniel Levy did brilliantly was turn a small, not small, a club with a huge history, but I'm talking about in Premier League actual terms at the point he took over. A club that was on the, fighting to not get relegated a lot of the time and stuff like that. Definitely wasn't achieving anything. Was definitely not finishing in the top half of the table very often, let alone qualify for Europe or anything like that, right? And what Daniel Levy did masterfully was turn a club that had raw potential, but it was mostly potential, and realized that potential. He realized that potential. His remit to take us from a sort of struggling former power into an active power again, he completed that. That's it. That's his journey. His journey was taking Spurs on that journey I've just sort of gone on about there for the last 15, 20 minutes. He transformed Tottenham into this entity, into this huge club, into this wonderful thing. But what is abundantly clear is that when we got to that level, when we created it, it's sort of like it's an Oppenheimer of sorts, right? It's a guy who's managed to create something more powerful than he can control. And I kind of feel like that's what I would say from the outside, from everything we learn of it, that Levy just didn't have the right thing about him to mix it at that level, right? He didn't have the right thing to mix. He just couldn't do it at that level. We saw it ever since the new stadium opened, and ever since we were putting ourselves forward as this super club, right? This club that just gets it done. You could see we just acted differently from other clubs. We make fun of Manchester United, right? And they are a bit of a shambles still. But Manchester United go out and get deals done. They don't sit there for weeks on end, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. The Manchester United, we want your player. This is what you're getting for it. Take it. That's what Chelsea do. And I know it's different. It's different. I don't know. I'm not giving them any credit. Chelsea is a completely different story, as is Manchester City. But let's say Arsenal. Arsenal, for example, right? Arsenal are a club now that have a similar sort of turnover to Spurs, make a similar sort of profit to Spurs. Obviously, it waxes and wanes between the two of us when we're going through leaner periods and not Champions League revenue, all that type of thing. But for the most part, the infrastructure, the size of the clubs now is comparable to Tottenham and Arsenal, right? Arsenal, the way they operate, this is the thing. We know this. Arsenal know what you have to do at that level. Because you can do all you want. You obviously have to bear in mind the monetary side of things, the economics functioning of a club. You have to bear that in mind. And there's certain things that fans won't ever grasp. But things that fans will grasp is the optics of the way in which a club behaves. And what Arsenal do is always maintain that they want to win. They want to be the best. We had a laugh. We have a laugh about it. The fact that on their wall, you walk through the kind of they showed this. Was it in All or Nothing or something? I think it was in their All or Nothing, wasn't it? When Arteta's walking around the halls at their sort of training ground complex, and in the wall they've got a hole that you're supposed to put a trophy in, right? There's like a hollow for the Champions League trophy, a hollow for the Premier League trophy, and we all sit there and have a laugh about it. But what that is, it's optics on a club. That's them saying we want to win stuff. Whereas for years now, we've arrived at the top. We've arrived at the top, right? And we could all believe we were all bought into the journey, 16, 17, 17, 18. Okay, we're not buying players, but we believe. We believe because, look, we've seen the club grow. We're seeing it expand. And once the stadium is built, because that was the golden carrot, wasn't it? That's what was dangled in front of us. Once that stadium is built, this game-changing stadium, it's all going to be different. It's all going to change. And it didn't. And that's the starkest reality of it. It didn't change. We didn't follow suit from clubs like Arsenal, from clubs like Liverpool, clubs like Manchester United, at least in the sense in how we operate. We arrived at the top table. It's like it's a fine dinner, right? They're all sat there having steak, sirloin steak, and having all the sides, everything they want, the finest bottles of wine, and we've turned up with a packed lunch. Right? We've got a fancy suit on, but we're still sat there with a packed lunch. Oh, it's all right, guys. Don't worry about us. We're happy to sit here and have a chat with you, if that's all right. But we'll sit here and have a beef sandwich while you're having a steak and wine. We'll have a beef sandwich and tap water. It's kind of how we've operated, and it's just not. It's not going to wash, is it? And it hasn't washed. It hasn't worked. He's come to the end of the road. We all know it. It's been toxic. The huge protests over the past few years, which are only going to grow. And just the general, like the media line now is just all it does is focus on Spurs' failings. The glee with which they treated the Morgan Gibbs White fiasco, the glee with which they greeted the Eza stuff. It's just too much noise. It's taken away from a club that won a major trophy last season. And as he said to Gary Neville in his kind of piece, maybe people will only appreciate me when I'm gone. Maybe that's what dawned on him. Maybe he's realized he's just tarnishing his own legacy now. So he has gone. That's it. I mean, it's the start of a new era, and all we can do now is reflect on what is maybe to come. But it's been a hell of a ride. It's been a hell of a ride, and like I say, in my heart, I don't feel ill will towards the guy. I don't. If anything, I am grateful for what he's done for the club, for where he's taken the club to. And I've had a laugh about him, and I've moaned about him down the years and everything like that. But I think one of the things I'll leave you with before I wrap this up, one of the things that, and Paul O'Keefe is somebody, if you ask him, you can see him on Twitter, he will complain about the board as much as anybody. But one thing that he has said that really stuck with me that I like is that the thing is, whatever you say about Daniel Levy, he always bats for the club. He always bats for the club in every negotiation, be it with other clubs, be it with players, be it with players at the club who think they have ideas above their station. He has said Daniel Levy will always bat for the club. That, like, one of his opening lines when they're trying to sign players, which, is seen as quite funny, but it also shows you where it's coming from, is essentially saying to the player, do you feel proud that a club as big as us is coming after you? That, he's somebody that hasn't allowed the likes of Real Madrid to really stamp all over us. He managed to get good value out of the deal for Gareth Bale, close to a world record fee at that point. He's always batted for the club, and he's always had the club's best interest. We might not have always agreed with it, but in his in his head, he's always felt like he's had the club's best interests at heart. So I can't hold any ill will towards him for that. I probably won't ever forgive him for letting that Pochettino team slip through his fingers, because we could have won the lot under them, and I fully believe that. But, you know, he's built the club at least to a point where hopefully getting back there at some point isn't a distant, far off dream now, like it once was when I was a kid. I kind of feel like I can sit here now from the position that we're in and say it's not going to happen overnight, but if we make the right moves, if we take the right steps, can I see this club winning the lot one day? Yeah, maybe. I don't think it's a total fantasy. So I think that's what Daniel Levy's given us, and I thank him for that. And I also still stand by the fact that I'm happy that he's gone now. I think it's the right time. And yes, we step into the unknown, but look, it is what it is. Life is all about gambles, isn't it? Life is all about taking risks. And, nothing ventured, nothing gained. So let's see where we go. I think I've exhausted myself on this topic for one evening. But I do appreciate everybody who has tuned in on YouTube. If you are still watching on YouTube, please, and you haven't dropped it a like yet, please do drop me a like. I really do appreciate it. Helps other people to see it. It helps the channel to get suggested to other people. If you're listening to the audio version of this as a podcast, please do leave a rating, leave a review, and share it. If you're on Reddit, like I say, if you're on one of those threads on Reddit where people are saying, what's a good podcast? I want Tottenham content about Daniel Levy. Get it in my veins. Just say, if you've not listened to Rule the Roost, give that a listen. And I massively appreciate that. If you aren't tired of hearing my voice as much as you currently are, I do have a Patreon as well, patreon.com/RTRpod. Get involved on there for extra content and also ad-free podcasts as well. But yeah, it is the end of an era. Daniel Levy, he has gone. Tottenham Hotspur live on, and Daniel Levy is now a point in our history, and we move from him as we all move in time. Goodbye, Daniel. Thanks for most of the memories. It was definitely time to go, but thank you. Enjoy the rest of your life, I guess. Sounds a bit grim, doesn't it? But, do it. Thanks, everybody. Come on, you Spurs. Up the Spurs.